and I have started recording.
Hello everyone, I'm Jose Rivera, the CEO of CSIA. Thank you for attending this month's webinar. Today's webinar is Best Practices in Digital and Remote Employee Communications, which addresses the challenge many of our system integration member companies face today, managing work teams located away from the home office. Be sure to ask questions in the Q&A box, not the chat box. Questions will be answered during the webinar, so be sure to ask them. The webinar will be archived for later viewing, and the slides will be available also. The host and sponsor of our monthly business topic webinars is Software Toolbox, a CSIA partner member. Software Toolbox understands that you're not just buying software licenses, but are investing in a relationship where you depend on your suppliers to be there every step of the way. This month's Software Toolbox asks, is your team delivering all the value it could for your customers' reporting systems? Deliver more value with Dream Reports. Visit softwaretoolbox.com/Dream Report for more information. I would like to introduce today's webinar presenter, Jeff Miller. Jeff is Director of Project Management at Interstate Control Systems, Inc., a CSIA certified member in the Sioux Falls, South Dakota area. He holds an BS in Electrical Engineering from South Dakota State University. Jeff is a certified project management professional by the Project Management Institute and a member of the PMI South Dakota chapter. Jeff is the current treasurer of the CSIA Board of Directors and has been a member of this board since 2009. So without any further delay, here's Jeff.
Thank you, Jose. Looking forward to the presentation today, and I just want to encourage you that are on the call today, if you have questions, please type them in the Q&A box as we go, and I will try to answer those along the way in case there's something that you have a question about. We don't want to wait till the end if you've got something that comes up as we go. So I just want to welcome you and hope you get something useful for your company out of our presentation today. And we'll be looking at digital communications and remote employee communications, and these really tie very well together, typically because of why we need to use digital communications for remote employees. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about both of those today, and here's kind of our agenda. We'll be looking at why is the workforce changing, what digital communication tools are available to you, what are the best practices in using those digital communication tools, what are some lessons learned that Interstate has put together around digital communications. Then we're going to look at keys to managing remote employees, some things, and as well as some lessons learned from our communication of remote employees. We have several remote offices, and with as few as 2 people in them to maybe as many as 15 or 20 people in those remote offices. And just recently we hired one of our first actual remote employees that doesn't even work in an office, and we think that that's going to be something you'll see a lot more of, and I'm actually going to cover a little bit of that as we go into why the workforce is changing here. So I know you are all very well aware of this. The workforce is changing a lot because there's just a greater competition for this limited pool of resources, and especially in those areas where it's knowledge workers. And we all have got a tremendous amount of knowledge workers in our group. So if it's an engineering or a highly technical person, we're seeing a lot more with that. The businesses are a lot more global today than they used to be. We're seeing, continuing to see, it probably started a lot back in the 2009 era, a lot of mergers and acquisitions, which means now you've got a remote office where you've merged with another company, and you need to be able to communicate with that remote office. And a couple of the really big things that's changing the workforce is that the newer workers, you'll hear them called millennials. I know they hate to hear that when that term comes out, because so far we hear a lot of people talk negatively about that, but you need to be able to embrace the way that they work. And the new workforce, whether it's the millennials or the next generation that's coming up, are all very digitally connected. They actually prefer communicating digitally than they do from face-to-face communications. So that's a big deal. And even in your office today, I'm sure that many of you have noticed that they'll use instant messenger or they'll use texting to talk to their fellow employee, even though they may only be just across the room from them. So this really is a preferred method of communication for them. And even bigger than that, though, is many employees today want to live where they want to live. And their family is their number one importance. A lot of them are saying, hey, I want to pursue my hobbies. I love to snow ski. I want to move to Colorado. And if you don't have an office there, you're likely going to lose that employee. So we've chosen to kind of embrace that, allow the employee to work from a remote location, whether it be an office or working from their home. But it is a big change in just the way the workforce perceives the workplace today. And also, if you think about it, there's just fewer distractions when not in the office. I'm pretty sure if I could poll the group out there today, if I asked you where you would go if you needed to be uninterrupted, you would not say that it was to go to the office. Many of us choose to work from home or some remote location when we need to get things done. So I think you would agree that there are fewer distractions there. So why is the competition greater, though? This is getting to be a bigger deal as we look, but you'll notice the term silver tsunami here. The term comes from the fact that we're just not training enough technical people to replace those baby boomers that will be leaving the marketplace. One of the studies that I looked at from Georgetown University said that by 2020, they're estimating 165 million workers in the workforce, and that there'll be at least a 5 million workforce shortage. So there'll be that many people that the workforce will need that just won't be available. Some other things that study showed are the fact that some industries, more than 50% of their senior management is going to retire by 2020. That means you're going to have a lot of leadership gaps that you're going to have to fill with some of the technical talent that you have today potentially, which means you're not going to have as many of your workers out there doing the real work that needs to get done. And this is going to be a pull from even our systems integration companies. As these people retire, the recruiters are going to be hitting our folks up very heavily. So we need to be prepared to let them work the way they need to work to keep them satisfied. And, it's just hard enough today to find enough qualified workers for the workforce. And if you're going to be able to do it, you will have to start looking at remote offices and remote workers in order to keep your business growing. So that being said, think about your business today as well. Lots of us have gone more global even. We're no longer a regional company. We may be nationwide now. Some of us have even gone to the global side. And this is the reason a lot of our yards are a lot bigger than they used to be. Instead of competing with local systems integrators or other engineering firms, we go global or we go bigger than that in order to stay away from some of that competition. You hear it all the time that the The world is much flatter. There's less borders. It's just much more of a global economy than it used to be. And our clients are going global. Many of our largest clients today have been global for many years, and they're looking for systems integrators that can work not only in their U.S. plants, but that they can also work globally. So it just makes for that need to be able to work remote, whether it's an office in another country or a couple of remote workers in another country or just other people across the U.S. The other sign, too, is that the workforce today is much more digitally communicative. They just do that. That's what they grew up with. That same study from Georgetown University said that by 2020, 46% of the workforce is going to be out of the millennial group. And digital communications is really what they grew up with, what they know how to do, and they do it very well. And this generation that's coming up after them is even more so focused on technology. I give the example of my 3-year-old grandson. He's been using an iPhone, just the touch interface on an iPhone to play games, or an iPad since before he was 2 years old. And it's just second nature to him. In fact, if he goes up to a TV that has a icon on it, he always wants to click on the icon on the screen. So it's just a whole different world out there today than what maybe myself, being a baby boomer, what we would have anticipated. If we'd started looking into the future, we would have had no reason to even think about it changing the way it has. The other thing that's big with workforce today is most of those new workers that are coming in fact, more than 50% of them say that a flexible work environment is really key to their satisfaction. So this is a big deal, because this is why if you look at resumes from a lot of the newest workers out there, very few of them stay with companies for more than 1 or 2 years. They'll have 4, 5, 6 different jobs on their resume before they come to you the first time. And this is part of the reason they're not satisfied with where they're at. A lot of them want to live near family. We talked about that a little earlier, or do their hobbies. And then the studies would show that many of them would take this benefit, flexible work environment, over any other benefit you could offer them. So better insurance, even pay, they would accept lower pay to be able to work from home or to be able to work from the location that they prefer to. So something to really consider. So really all of that is just to say, if you're going to survive and thrive as a business, you're going to have to figure out how to communicate with remote employees and remote offices. And business life as usual just really isn't going to cut it. You're going to have to learn to do things differently. So that being said, there are a lot of digital communications tools out there. We're going to actually look at some of these, and in fact, I would hazard to say that most of us from systems integration firms are using all or most of these technologies today. Be surprised as to how many businesses out there aren't embracing some of them, though. But there are some big best practices around them that will make a huge difference in how successful you are. So obviously, email is a digital communication tool. When I started with Interstates, which has really only been 16 years ago, I had never had an email account. And today, I wished I didn't have an email account on occasions when I get 100 emails a day. But it has become a huge part of what we do as business. Obviously, our cell phones, but not just for voice. You can do FaceTime, you can do texting, lots of different technologies as the smartphones have come out. We answer our emails via our cell phones. It's just kept you digitally connected much differently than we would have ever thought 15 years ago when I started with Interstate. We use a lot of Skype for business. It used to just be, well, in fact, it is still part of the Microsoft suite, but you can use it for instant messaging, video, screen share, and I'll look at that one just a little bit differently here in just a minute. Screen share programs, we're all very used to using those, but that becomes very important as you have remote employees. We do that with our clients just about every day. Having SharePoint, we call them a project management site, and I'll show you a few pictures of our PM site and how that changes the way we can collaborate together. And then, of course, a lot of you have probably heard of Google Docs or Dropbox, being able to share and collaborate on electronic documents via those. A newer one that we've started working with is this Microsoft Yammer, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then having a corporate knowledge base or some form of a wiki so you can share lessons learned and make sure that they get disseminated to the entire group. So those are a few things we're just going to cover in a little more detail. This was a surprising fact to me as I looked at it, and if you notice, this is actually a 2009 stat, so I will guarantee you that this has even changed considerably since then. Today, in this study, 14.4 trillion emails are sent a year versus 177 billion snail mail or actual physical mail things that you might receive. Of course, the alarming stat to me was that 81% of those 14.4 trillion emails are spam, and I think you probably realize that. You probably just didn't know it was that much, but yet 47% of snail mail is junk mail as well. So still a lot, but email really outnumbers snail mail. In this case, back in 2009, 81 to 1. So a huge amount of what we do today is done via email. So let's think a little bit about texting and instant messaging. Why is that so popular? Well, as we talked earlier, many of our employees only communicate with their family and friends that way. You absolutely, if you've got a teenager or even a 20-something in your family, if you try to call them, they will not answer their phone, most of them. I tried my daughter, she's 23 years old, and I still can't get her on the phone. I can text her, and she'll answer me back almost immediately. But that's the way they grew up. They grew up texting. They'll sit around the table together, and I know you've all seen that as well, and they're not talking to one another, they're texting, and most of the time they're texting each other around the table. So this is just something that they have learned to do, and they will continue to do. So having that available in the workforce as they pull into your workforce makes a huge difference for them. So another thing is it's very fast, and I get only what I need out of it. That's why teens like texting and why our younger employees like texting. It's very quick. They can get just what they need, and they're off back and working again. You're in control of the conversation and how long it goes. If you quit texting back, the conversation is over. It may still feel rude on the other end, but it's easy to control versus a phone call. It's very rude when you hang up on someone. So just not answering, they just think you got busy and you needed to do something else. Then one of the things that I really like about Instant Messenger or the Skype for business is that it has a presence detection. I know when they're in meetings. I know if they're on and available. And so I have a better chance of knowing that I'll get an answer back from them if I can see that they're actually there. And I don't typically get junk mail, instant messages, or text, although that's not true anymore. It seems like I do get texts on my phone that are junk, but not near as often as you do emails. But of course, there are some negatives associated with it. They are very impersonal. Like emails, oftentimes your text doesn't show what emotions you have. And what I found early on many of our programmers, or engineers in particular, type in caps all the time. So when you text someone in all caps, that means you're mad. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that is the case. So you have to be very careful not to associate emotion with the text that come. Probably one of the biggest challenges for me today is to get the younger group to get on a phone with a client instead of just back and forth emails and text. Because sometimes they get each other upset and they don't solve that problem, and all it took was a 5-minute phone call and everything was solved. So as a project manager, when I have to try to get 2 team members in a room together to call a client just because they won't call them, it feels like you're babysitting at times, but it is it's the way they communicate today. And then the other nice thing is, especially with Skype for Business, you can capture those text conversations, and they can be stored in electronic files. So if you needed to be able to prove to a client that you did get a verbal on a change order, you do have it there. It is a little more difficult to back up your exchange, but probably no more so than a phone call. Email, obviously, much easier to store. All right. So from there, I just got a couple of pictures of the tools. That we use this one very frequently, and again on this you can see for mine that I was available. I have a picture there. You don't always have it, like you can see Pam here doesn't have a picture on hers, but it's nice because I can tell that she was available. I did a quick conversation with her, got off the conversation, and I got the answers that I needed. So very useful from those types of conversations. So the other big piece is, and you can do this through those instant messenger programs as well. You can actually turn it into a video conference. But what is the importance of video and screen sharing? Especially with the remote employees, it's a team building opportunity. When you can actually physically see that person face to face, it makes a difference. We have some remote team members that I probably have only met actual face to face 3 or 4 times in the 5 or 6 years that they've been here. But when I talk to them via business Skype, I will set it up as a video conference very frequently so I can still see them and they can get to know me a little bit better. These are big for collaboration. In fact, virtual whiteboarding is something that you would frequently use. You do this with your clients as well, but whether it's Skype for Business or it's WebEx or whatever the tool is that you're using, those all have these collaboration environments that allow you to do this. And then it really does feel more like an office without the travel. I can feel involved in the conversation. One tool that I didn't mention in the rest of the presentation, but this picture reminded, is a smartboard that really allows, if you have smartboards on both ends of the conversation, both parties can be writing on the smartboard, and then you can capture those communications in an electronic file. And then if your meeting isn't done, you can actually present those, put it right back up on the electronic whiteboard, and then complete the design meeting or the collaboration meeting that you were working on. So some big changes there. This is just an example we do frequently. We'll do an electronic whiteboard. You can see I've got a video conversation going on. I'm displaying a screen, and the person on the other end is marking some areas that she wanted to talk to me about. So makes it very much a collaboration environment. They can use highlighters. They can use whatever tools are available in your PDF reader or your PDF full-blown Adobe, or in this case we were using Bluebeam. You can use those when you're in this virtual whiteboarding, and you just share presentation mode. So very powerful. You can get through design meetings very quickly, and you can still feel like you were part of the conversation because you were seeing that person face to face. One of the things that I've noticed with the video side, though, is I can actually tell if they're engaged in the conversation. And if you've been on conference calls before, in fact, last time I did this presentation, I had a little video clip that I played of a conference call in real life, and you know how you walk on each other frequently. Well, if you have the video involved, you can actually see that they're trying to say something, and you don't walk on each other near as much. Versus a conference call, seems like we run into that a lot more. So I found that to be very helpful, not only to just get to know them better, but to make the conversation even more effective. So one of the other tools I talked about was SharePoint and project sites. We call them PM sites, or we have a tool called Project Management Toolbox, and that's where we store all of our project information. Gives you one place to find everything related to that project, gives you document control, and you know, SharePoint, especially with Microsoft products, is very useful from the check-in, check-out, version controlling, all that type of thing. And then you can also set up automated workflows. So if someone does make a change to a document, you can build a workflow for approval of those changes to say, well, it needs to route to these 3 different people after a change is made before the change is approved, and you just build those automated workflows into it. And then the other nice thing about this is the teammates can collaborate on documents and know who made the changes. So a couple of screenshots here. This is our project management toolbox. Again, every project site would have one of these set up, and we can adjust the way they work, but they all have libraries, they all have different kinds of things that you can utilize. We kind of have minimum criteria that they have to utilize it for, but this does become for that project. While it is running as a project, it becomes our one and only repository for project documents. And whether it's a email exchange with the client, a request for information, submittals, transmittals, all those things are done directly through this one tool, so everybody knows that we've done those things, and we don't have multiple people talking to the client about the same thing over and over again. So just a couple more screen captures. This is just one of the libraries here showing, you know, that the documents are stored there. They show when they were modified last, who modified them, and then the other nice thing about these is that you can go in and look at the version history of a document, and it'll actually show you who modified it, when, what was changed in it, and this allows me to actually revert back to a previous version of that document. And this works very well with any Microsoft products. And I know many of you are already using some form of a SharePoint site for document control. Just another way to it's kind of the basic level of configuration management for you as an integrator. Other things that we like to do is we have our contacts listed in our PM toolbox, so it makes it very easy. I just have anybody who's associated with this project is in our contact list, has their phone numbers, their email addresses, gives me a quick and easy access to that, so the team members don't have to go look through our CRM or a contact list to try to find it in the list of all of our clients. One other one that I've mentioned is Google Docs or Dropbox. A couple of examples. Google Docs is up here in the top. Google Docs is nice because it is a very collaborative work environment too. Multiple people can be working on the same document, and it will store and tell you who's made those changes. And you can set up Dropbox to be very similar to that, but it gives you a remote storage location. Gives your clients, you can give clients access to it, you know, instead of having to have something on your network and email it to your client. Just like a, you know, an FTP site, Google Docs or Dropbox allows you to communicate and collaborate in a little different fashion. Okay, and then one other one that I had mentioned was Yammer. This is something we started using about a year ago now. It's basically Facebook or social media for business. So as I talked earlier about many of the workers that you're bringing into your workforce today, they're very used to communicating on Facebook and LinkedIn and all those electronic sites. They're very social media savvy. This is a tool that they really like. This is behind the firewall, so it's private groups. You can make it public to your team, or you can invite customers to a public group. But if I just did a Google search looking for something associated that I thought might be on a Yammer site, I would not find that. I would have to invite someone to that group before they can actually see it from the outside. What we found is it's a great way to just post a quick update to my group or my team, and only they see it, or anybody who's subscribed to that Yammer site sees it. So you can, when I talk about a Yammer site, each team could have their own little Yammer site, and it allows them to communicate back and forth. What I see a lot of our teams doing is, like, one of our divisions, one in particular associated with our manufacturing IT group, they use that as a replacement for any department emails. So if somebody was online and they read a really good article that they thought they would want to share with the team, they post that they read that article, they put the link to the article on there and what they liked about it. So it really becomes this team collaboration site. And this is just an example of that. You know, only the people on the team read this, but this gentleman had read this article on VMware and their new hybrid cloud strategy, and he thought it was a really cool article, so he posted it out to the team and gave them a hyperlink to it so they could read it as well. Many times what you'll find then is this becomes a threaded conversation that others post back and say, hey, that was pretty neat. Here's another article that I found, and it gets you thinking differently. So, but it doesn't, if you did this through corporate email, it just kind of gets lost either in your inbox or wherever you filed it. This I can go back to at any time, the Yammer site, and I can do a search and I can find, oh, what were the last conversations on VMware, and it'll search those and let me find them very easily. So we found it to be very helpful. Gets used actually quite a bit internally, and it's a good way to just send department communications. The knowledge base, I'm sure many of you have figured out how to do these. This really is it's more like a wiki, or if you think about Wikipedia, it's storing your company knowledge in a way that it can easily be searched and categorized. So some examples that we use it for, we may have a lesson learned with a specific vendor's technology, and we don't want everybody to have to relearn that. So we post an article associated with that technology, what application it was in, and what our lessons learned were. And then that gets published, and everybody knows that it's been published. You'll get notice as you subscribe to certain feeds in that wiki. And just the one thing to be aware of, though, is that anyone can edit, just like in Wikipedia. And so, you know, that's really part of the issue, is that you just have to be careful with that. Hold on just a second. I'm going to switch to a different audio here. Okay, hopefully this is a little better. I was using my headset, but I saw one person had acted like they could not hear me very well, so I just decided to. So if you think about Wikipedia, that's more like what your knowledge base. We found these to be really, really helpful, though, from our benefits as a company and getting those lessons learned shared with not only your remote employees, but those that are in the office, because they really, most of them are used to communicating very digitally. So another thing this is just an example of our wiki or our knowledge base, but again, categorized topics, and people can easily get on these, and they can post, questions back, just like a threaded conversation in Yammer, as I was talking about before. All right. So some best practices. Really, you need to pick the tools that are right for your business. Not everybody is going to use all the tools that I showed today. We've tried a lot of tools. We've gone away from a lot of tools. We've picked ones that work very well for us. But my really recommendation to you is that you establish some form of a technology team. Put people on there from different teams in your group, as well as someone from maybe your IT crew. Your goal is to, you've got to get tools, evaluate them, and then build policies around them. These tools are great, but if you don't build a good policy around them, they may be misused. Just like you'll have today, most of you should have a policy around email communications and what's appropriate to put in emails and what's appropriate to put in your electronic instant messages. Those are things that, as a company, you need to build a policy around. Set up your digital tools for success. You need to make them easy to use. An example I give of this is sometimes you just implement the tool and you turn on all the features that it possibly could have, but you only use about 2 or 3 or 4 features there. If you turn everything on, everybody is going to try everything, and it just gets very confusing for the team members. So set it up, build your policy around it, build some training around that, and then make sure that you give, good discussion with your IT crew around how much internet bandwidth is it going to take. Digital tools take a lot of internet bandwidth, and it's very frustrating to those remote workers in particular, well, even the ones in the office, when those tools don't work right, because now you spend a quarter of your meeting trying to work out the issues with your electronic tools. Make sure that you're setting those up for success. The other thing is train, verify their use, and retrain as needed. I can't emphasize that enough. If you don't train your people on how to use the tools right, they either won't get used at all or they'll get used improperly, and then there'll be a lot of noise in your company about how horrible the tools are. Most of the time it's just a training issue that gets most of them. And then, pick an early adopter team. When you're wanting to roll out your first, if you've got a team that has a remote employee on it already and you want to try out a new tool, pick that team. They're typically the ones that are willing to try new things anyway if they allowed you to bring in a remote worker. But you'll know who the early adopter teams are. Those are the guys that, as soon as the iPhone 6 Plus came out, they were the first ones to have it. They're the ones that pushed IT to load some other software because they really thought it was neat and cool. That's your early adopter team. Pull them into your tryout group. Okay, then also, this was some key lessons learned that we've had. You need to really set that policy on what information is allowed to be shared. Some digital media is public, especially if they're using Twitter, they're using LinkedIn, things that get posted to those, very public, and you need to have a good policy around what is appropriate, and you need to have discipline policies around that. It really is your business and your customer's business. You've signed confidentiality agreements with your client. That confidential information has got to get kept confidential.
And just remember that if any negative information does get posted on Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever it might be, it can get out pretty quickly. So having a policy, enforcing the policy is a big deal. And then making sure that your confidential information remains confidential. That's hugely important to our clients, and we need to be very cognizant of the fact that they expect us in no uncertain terms to keep their information confidential. And realize that the tools are great, but they're not perfect. And they get better every time they release a new version. The problem is a lot of us try a tool, we don't give it enough time to make it work. Give it at least 6 to 12 months before you move on and try something else. If you don't give it enough time, most of these tools will be frustrating at least a little up front, and you may not get to the spot where you're successful at them if you don't give them enough time. All right, so the next piece of it is really, what about remote employee communication? Probably some of the key things, and I'm actually going to give a couple of resources at the end of this. One of the books that we read was called Remote Office Not Required, and I'll pop that slide up at the very end. But it talks a lot about working as a remote employee, having remote employees on your team. To be successful at it, you've got to pick people that are the right people. Not everybody can work remote. They don't all have the same work habits. You need someone that is going to be good at it. And a lot of times that means they have to work in the office for a while before you know if they're the right people. Another thing that the book pulled out was if they've worked as a contractor before, a lot of times they're very used to working remote, and they may be more successful, and maybe the very first one you hire would be someone who had worked as a contractor before. It does require more communication and communicating in different ways. Make sure that you use video conference at least part of the time with a remote worker. It's not you need those people to feel like they're part of the team. If they're only talking by phone, most of us multitask when we're doing phone conversations, and you just don't get to know your team very well. So video conference changes that up a bit. You get to see the person, they get to see you, and it does make a huge difference. The other thing that this book brought out, and we found to be very successful, is managing more by goals and outcomes than managing by tasks and activities that you might be assigning them. You're not going to see them working. That's probably one of the hardest things for your managers from the very get-go. They're used to being able to walk into someone's cube and know that they're working on your code. When they're working from home or working from a remote office, you don't see them. So you need to set very realistic expectations and then follow up on those expectations. You know, not any different than you would with people that are in the office, but you do need to manage, you need to think different when you're managing off goals and outcomes, though. Another best practice that we have determined is that we set up weekly one-on-one meetings with the supervisor. Some of these are 15 minutes long, probably max of 30 minutes long, unless they're in a mentoring relationship with another employee. That might last an hour. But make sure that at least 2 of those weekly one-on-ones per month are done by video conference. Another thing that I like to talk to my managers about, make sure that they do like a little, at least early on when they're first getting to know this remote employee, do a little 5-minute check-in call every day, and kind of maybe even treat it more like this next item, which is like a daily scrum. Scrum meetings, if you're not familiar with them, that comes from the Agile development methodology. And a scrum meeting is really just a little short 15-minute meeting every day with your entire team, and everybody goes around the room and says, what did I get done yesterday? What am I planning to get done today? And what are my roadblocks? Those 3 questions they have to answer. And what we've found is that those, even if you're not on an Agile team, doing that with a remote worker adds a tremendous amount of value to the team. They get to know each other better, and we know when they have roadblocks in their way. Most technical people don't like to say they don't know what to do, so they tend to just sit and do nothing or try their hardest to get it done, and they're just not going to get it done by themselves. Another best practice that we found is bringing those team members to the office at least once a year. A lot of companies that I've talked to do it twice a year, realize that it's a cost, but most of us start to realize the benefit in remote employees is that I don't have as much infrastructure for them. Our remote employees that we do, we still buy them monitors. We supply them with their laptop and mouse and keyboard. We will give them a voice over IP phone that they'll use from their home, but they have to supply their own internet. They have to supply their office space, and we do require them to have a separate office space so that they can be away from the family. Another thing to think about, though, is to let them work in a shared workspace. A lot of the bigger cities today have shared workspaces where you just rent a space, and you can rent by the day, by the week, however you want to do it. But it's basically a cubicle that you rent and allows them to be around other employees, even though they're not employees of your company. They still get to feel part of a team, whether it's your team or not. But then really probably one of the bigger things with this is let the whole team work remote on occasion. One thing that we found is that those that don't work remote typically don't understand the challenges that remote worker is going through. So they may have less empathy for that remote worker. Making them all work remote on occasion means that they understand a little more what the remote worker is going through. And I would say this is especially important for the manager of that team. Make the manager work remote on occasion. The first team that we picked, the manager of that team already was telecommuting 2 days a week, and so it was just a natural team to try it on. And it has been working very well with that team, so it gave us a good one to try it with. Another thing to remember, just like you celebrate with your employees that are in the office, make sure you celebrate with your remote employees. Don't forget their birthdays. When they go out and get a new certification, have a little celebration. Do something video conference with them and send something to their home office and have something back in the other office, but have a good celebration with the entire team. Still important to do that. I did have one question come in on repeating the Scrum questions. The three things that we find the most important to ask is, what did I get accomplished yesterday? What am I going to accomplish today? And what are the roadblocks from allowing me to accomplish those things? And that's been really helpful for us. So keep those in mind as you look through that. All right. One of the things, we did have quite a few lessons learned associated with remote worker management. Really the biggest ones being, a lot of times you get all these digital communications tools set up and you think it's the best thing since sliced bread, and the people don't use them. So what we found is you just have to make sure you set policy around them, you make sure that people are using them appropriately, you train, you retrain, and you just work through the issues that you're going to have. Guaranteed you will have issues, but you're not going to have as many issues as you think. So don't just build it and throw it out there and expect everybody to use it. You do need to make sure that those work. I had another question come in related to the Yammer sites and if they're difficult to set up. I have not set those up myself, but from talking to our manufacturing IT group, for their IT gurus, They act like it's no big deal to set up. It'd be very similar to setting up even like a SharePoint site, is from what they were telling me. So not difficult, but something obviously that that can be learned fairly quickly. It is a visual interface like other Microsoft products. So, and if you are a Office 2013 or Office Online, Office in the cloud, it's part of your package. So it's very easy to, you know, it's just part of what you get, kind of like SharePoint with that. Okay, another lesson learned that we had was assuming the remote workers are well trained because they're not complaining. Never assume that they're not complaining, and that just means that they're very well satisfied. A lot of them don't know you very well yet. So the goal is to ask them. That's why when you do those 3 Scrum meetings and you ask, or Scrum questions, and you ask, what are your roadblocks? If anybody on the team shares a roadblock, it's usually everybody's got one, and they will all start to share. But make sure that you're checking in with your remote workers even more. You want those remote workers, you want to know what are their roadblocks. So that little 5-minute checkup meeting with them, especially when they're first starting, you're setting up some communication paths so that they feel very comfortable calling you at any time. And that's not necessarily what will happen if you don't open that door. It's just like having your open door policy in your office. If your door's open, anybody's welcome to jump in and ask you a question. They don't know that your door's open when they're a remote employee. Make sure that they feel very comfortable talking with you, and you're checking in with them frequently. One of the things that I found, and this is just, it kind of blew my mind at first, the hardest people to sell on this are the supervisors. And the reason being is they are so used to having the supervisors can just walk into the cube and tell if somebody's working on their project or not. When they're remote, you can't do that. So be sure that you are, if you're having trouble with a remote and you're hearing from a manager that you're having trouble with remote, the very first thing that we do today is we make the manager work from a remote office for a while, or make them work from home for a while. Let them be the ones to get used to working remotely. And then they're used to asking different questions when they can't walk into the cube of the other person. And it just definitely is a much bigger deal than you would think. Realize, you know, hey, I know everybody's company culture is team, but the remote workers don't get it often. They don't hear it. They don't see it. What they see is what they get from their little 5-minute meetings in the morning, that once a year or twice a year when they come into the company. So do things as a team that reinforce your company culture. Talk about those things, especially when you're talking to the remote employee. Remind them that family is important to your company as a culture, that understanding the needs of your client is important. Whatever your things are that are really important to the company, just keep reminding them. The guys in the office see it and they feel it every day. The ones in remote don't, so you need to make sure that they're hearing it as well. Don't underestimate the value and the expense of face-to-face communications. When you have to bring those employees in the office every so often, it's plane tickets, it's, you know, you got to put them up in hotels. You're going to spend some money. The value you got out of them being remote was that you didn't have to have cubicle space for them in the office. If you have enough remote employees, you might even forego building onto your office or those types of things as you continue to grow. So think about those things, but don't underestimate. If you're thinking that it's just going to be cheaper for you complete to have a remote worker, that's not the case. These digital communication tools that you're going to need to implement all cost some money, Most of them are built right in. The things that we like to use are built right into Microsoft's package. But if you need a WebEx account, which probably most of you have 3 or 4 of them already today, it costs money per month to have them. So it's going to cost you money to bring them back. Just don't forget about that. And then really the bigger thing is forgetting that they're out there. It's easy, just like in a phone conversation like we're having today in this webinar. If I'm doing a meeting with a remote employee as well as other people that are in remote offices and people that are in my room with me, I find it much more easy and much more comfortable to talk to the people in the same room with me. You have to be very cognizant of the fact that those others want to participate in the conversation. Let them participate, call on them and make them participate. Otherwise, they're not going to feel part of the team. So I guess I'll just do a little quick wrap up here. It really is not, it's not about if you're going to need remote communications, you're going to have to do it at some point. Pick the right tools, build good policies around them, train and retrain as needed to use those tools. That's a huge thing for especially digital communications tools and trying new things. You got to do the training right. Pick the right people to start. Huge benefit. If somebody has been in a remote location before with another company, they already have an idea how to work remotely. That's a big advantage on your first one that you do. Make sure your supervisors are bought into it and trained in how to communicate with those. And then last but not least, make sure that that remote employee feels part of the team. So I know I booked through that information very quickly today. I do want to open it up if there are more questions. I've answered all the ones that have come in so far, but if there are more questions, or Monica, if you've had some come in direct to you, you can direct those to me and I'll try to answer them.
I do not have anything coming in directly to me.
Okay. So any other questions out there at this time? I don't see any in my chat window here. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk about, and we will be definitely posting a link to this webcast so you can watch it again if you would like. It'll be on the connected community when they get everything posted up. But yeah, it was I hope that you enjoyed it.
Okay, so this is Jose Rivera again. To all the attendees, thank you very much for your participation. My hope is that you have several takeaways and help you take a few steps closer to operational excellence. Jeff, thank you very much for the contribution of your time and expertise. Your presentation was very insightful. We wish the best for you and Interstate Control Systems. Keep up the good work. Thanks again to our host and sponsor, John Weber and Monica Anderson of Software Toolbox. Be sure to complete the survey for today's webinar. It will arrive in your mailbox within the hour, and it takes about 30 seconds to complete. Your feedback is necessary for our continuous improvement. In closing, I would like to remind you of 2 important things. One is Dr. Martin will provide the second and final webinar of his series Bottom Line Automation on Wednesday, October 21st at our usual 11 a.m. Eastern time slot. Make yourself a note in your calendar. Second, the exchange is growing in size and significance. Contact Tony Verhoeven in the CSIA office to take full advantage of it, whether you're an integrator or a supplier partner. And third, the new Pulse Statistics program is out. Make sure you take a fresh look at this powerful tool that directly increases the value of our association. And finally, if you have any suggested topic for our webinar, please include it in your comments. This is Jose Rivera, CSIA CEO. Thanks again for attending. Goodbye.